I'm the Lights, and I welcome you to the Shattered Throne. The Shattered Throne is a dungeon in Destiny 2 which brought much of the intrigue of raids, dialed it back a bit, and tuned it for 1 to 3 players. It was released just a few weeks following the release of the Forsaken expansion back in September of 2018. In 2022, its age definitely shows. Despite this, though, I do still find it to be an enjoyable experience and one that I recommend you try, especially with it being on the Pinnacle rotation every 5 weeks, so you can grab some Pinnacle loot from it. The Shattered Throne is pretty objectively the easiest dungeon in the game to do as 1, 2, or 3 people, and to solo flawless. If your goal is that solo flawless for the Shattered Throne, you'll likely be able to handle it on any subclass with fairly minimal resistance. So if I had to give you the easiest route per class while feigning ignorance of any current and undoubtedly broken artifact mods in the game at the time of you watching this, I'd say Hunters and Warlocks will have the easiest time on Void, abusing both Invisibility and Devour respectively. And Titans will have the easiest time on Solar, thanks to the sustain provided by Sunspots. The first encounter, as you're running around the different little temples, each with a corresponding symbol, and dispatching a yellow bar taken labeled a Labyrinth Architect, as well as the other trash in its immediate vicinity, which is usually just a few acolytes. Every time you do this, a symbol will pop up in the temple, indicating which temple you need to go to next to do the exact same thing. So in the example clip, I was at the 69 Fish Temple, which you can tell from the symbol on the wall there, and when I killed the Labyrinth Architect, the U-Snake symbol popped up, indicating that I need to go to the U-Snake Temple next. You'll do that a handful of times, and once the symbol that pops up is this one, you'll make your way back to where you started, kill a final group of enemies, as well as one last Labyrinth Architect, grab some loot, and continue on by dropping down a hole that will open up in the ground. Loadouts for this encounter do not matter a whole lot. I'd maybe consider bringing a burst damage, special, or heavy weapon to just make the architects die a little bit quicker. They don't have a ton of health, so it's not super necessary, but it can get a bit annoying laying into them for 30 seconds with your primary. Outside of that, a sword with Eager Edge will allow you to traverse the labyrinth much more quickly, and that is just good for your sanity. I wouldn't say try to get too fancy with the Eager Edge stuff, though, as the only real way you throw your flawless in this encounter is just by being impatient. It's only the first encounter, so resetting here isn't a huge deal, but pulling up a map and just looking before you leap could potentially save you quite a lot of time. No matter what you're running, though, be sure to fit the corresponding finders and/or scavengers and/or reserve mods onto your armor, as there are no rally flags in this dungeon, so you'll have to just make do with what you find. I generally get away with just ammo finders, but your results may vary. After you drop down, you'll come to a ledge that you're going to yeet yourself off of to your left, dropping down quite a ways to a platform below. From there, hang a right up the stairs and keep going until you get to a staircase that kind of winds you back up, and you'll find a bunch of ads, one of which will be a yellow bar taken captain, whose demise will open up the door at the back of the platform. Once you're through the door, where you need to go will likely be pretty clear. In this big open room, there will be snipers lining the walls and taking phalanxes on the catwalk in the middle that are going to try to boot you off. The first jump onto the catwalk is too far to make by conventional means, so if you want to make it, you want to just bust down the middle and ignore all the ads, you're going to have to use something like Heat Rises, Eager Edge, whatever tech you got. And if that's what you want to opt to do, then by all means send it right up the middle. If that's not what you want to do, you want to just take it slow, then you're going to have to go up onto the side and traverse across the catwalk, taking out the ads on the way. To make it quite a bit easier, it is definitely the higher percentage play to do this, but whatever gets you through. This next room I found to be the most lethal in the entire dungeon. It's ripped straight out of Dark Souls, having you traverse across narrow beams connected to pillars above an abyss. Falling into the abyss obviously kills you. And what's more is everything in the room is there to encourage that very outcome. To prevent said outcome, you'll firstly want to avoid the Taken Blights and the little mini Taken Blights that spin around them, as those will knock you off. Taken Ogres will also spawn, and their attacks have a ton of knockback, which can and will move you off. Taking the Ogres out from a comfortable distance is advised. As well, in this room and the room prior, having a sword can be a nice little lifeline. Even without Eager Edge, as swiping with a sword towards whatever booped you will kill your momentum and can definitely save your life. Now, you'll go through a funny looking door into the Thrallway. You'll be unable to sprint or double jump in the Thrallway, and you'll be constantly swarmed by Shadow Thrall that spawn infinitely. It's a pretty neat little encounter if you ask me, but the Shadow Thrall aren't the least bit threatening even in such numbers and will instead serve as a golden opportunity for you to farm up supers and ammo, as only a mild platforming section separates you from the first boss of the Shadow Thrall. I'll still touch on this next platforming section regardless, as most of the dungeon is platforming. Basically, you hop across the broken bridge in front of you that's after the Thrallway, hang a right, and hop between the ledges on the side of this building, just being careful not to get hit by the taken boops because there is a death zone below you. Then cross the gap to your right, hang a left once you're onto the platform, and head through the obvious door at the top of the stairs. Drop down, and then once you drop down your second time, you'll be into the Shattered Throne's first boss encounter. The first boss is a taken ogre called Vorgeth, and he should go down pretty quickly to even modest builds and DPS weapons. In the boss arena, one wizard will spawn on each of the 4 sides of the room, along with a slew of other annoying enemies like goblins and captains that'll try to prevent you from killing that wizard. Once you inevitably do kill the first wizard, it'll drop a blue orb on the ground, which you will pick up to gain a debuff called Petitioner's Mark. If you don't pick up another buff within the next 45 seconds, you wipe. Picking up the second orb will bring you to Petitioner's Mark times 2, third times to times 3, and on the fourth, your debuff will change to Petitioner's Burden. You take Petitioner's Burden and you dunk into one of the deposits toward the middle of the room. This will consume the buff and make Vorgeth vulnerable. At which point you will do a bunch of damage to Vorgeth, and if he becomes immune again before he's dead, you'll repeat the whole process with the orbs and the wizards and the dunking until he is dead. It should be noted that if you're doing this in a fire team, everything to do with the buff is completely shared. As in, anyone can pick up the buff and everyone will get it. Anyone can pick up the second orb to get everyone to times 2, and only one person needs to dunk to start damage and everyone's debuff will be cleared. For DPS in this encounter, burst supers are great, like Blade Barrage, Nova Bomb, Golden Gun, whatever. Like I said though, this guy doesn't have a whole lot of health, so it's not exactly going to take all the best god roll DPS guns and optimized armor mods to put Vorgeth in the dirt. Shotguns and swords might struggle a bit though, as Vorgeth's attacks do share the same knockback properties as other taken ogres, so he might just keep booping you away if you try to go that route. Linears or rockets are going to be the most straightforward, and are going to be what I recommend. After Vorgeth, we start our climb to the throne, requiring you to go up a handful of lifts, run around a bit, and cross a second Thrallway. The path you take through this area is pretty straightforward up to the end of the second Thrallway. Here, you'll want to come to the balcony and jump out of it to your right onto this narrow ledge, avoiding the taken boops along the way as well as the occasional taken hobgoblin. 2 specific areas to be careful of on this little ledge are this pillar here that sticks out onto the ledge. Just jump around it, don't try to walk around it. And then this little bit right here. The ledge doesn't extend all the way below you, so just make sure you jump to the part of the ledge you can actually see and don't try to just walk off of it. Now you've made your way to the final boss of the Shattered Throne. Said final boss is Dul Incaru. Dul Incaru is rather svelte in the health bar department. Not to the same degree as Vorgeth, but she does go down pretty quick. Solo players could be looking at anywhere from a 1 to 3 phase on Dul Incaru, depending on the efficacy of your loadout, and teams will likely knock out most of her health in 1 phase, if not all of it. Similar to Vorgeth, we're picking up a buff to do damage to the boss. This buff comes from the 3 beefy knights that skulk about the arena. The knights drop a blue orb on death, and picking one up begins damage. It is recommended that you kill all of the knights simultaneously, as picking up multiples of the buff at once will allow you to do more damage to the boss, and you won't have to worry about the knights while doing damage. It should also be noted that this buff, just like with Vorgeth, is shared throughout the entire fire team. The buff is also lethal to the player, however, if the timer hits 0. So be sure to jump on the platform in the center of the room to cleanse the buff before that happens. Unlike with Vorgeth, all players will have to do this to cleanse their debuff. A large crystal will spawn behind Dul Incaru or on either side of the room periodically, which will grant immune shields to the knights or prevent more knights from spawning. In either case, it halts your progression and needs to be destroyed. The crystal will always pop up when a damage phase ends. It'll make Dul Incaru immune again, and you'll need to kill it to spawn more knights so that you can get the buff again so that you can do more damage. For DPS options here, same rules apply as before. The boss pretty much stands completely still the whole time, so linear fusion rifles are going to be excellent. Rockets are also excellent. Swords, not the greatest because she does still hover a bit off the ground, but shotguns definitely will work if you want to go that route. Overall, linears would be what I recommend along with good burst damage supers such as the ones that I mentioned before. If you're curious what I was running in my solo flawless run serving as the background footage for this video, I'll be honest, there wasn't a whole ton of thought into it. It was more or less just what I had on at the time, and it could have definitely been better. I was on Solar Hunter with Blade Barrage, on your mark, and knock him down with the Star Eater Scales exotic, and abusing the hell out of Classy Restoration to get through this dungeon pretty painlessly. For weapons, I had the Callus and Mini Tool on for the entirety of the dungeon. For my kinetic slot, I swapped between the Wither Horde and the Izanagi's Burden. And then for the heavy slot, I swapped between an Eager Edge Sword and the Storm Chaser Linear Fusion Rifle for platforming and boss damage, respectively. We'll have a dim link in the description for the full loadout if you're curious about mod setups and fragments and such. And that's it! Simple as that. That's Shattered Throne. Super glad it's still in the game as it serves as a great starting point for folks trying to get into dungeons, get into soloing dungeons, solo flawlessing dungeons. No matter where you're at, what tier of dungeon content you're trying to get to, Shattered Throne's going to be a great first for you. So hopefully this guide helped wherever you're at on that path. And if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, commenting, subscribing. I very much appreciate it. And check out some of my other videos on dungeons if you're interested. Maybe you want to learn about raids. We've got that too. Maybe you just want some kind of other content. We got all kinds of stuff here. So check it out, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.